Okay, so our scripture reading, again, for those who missed it, comes from John chapter 10, verse 1 to 10. And it says, "Very truly, I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by another way is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls out his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers." Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So again, Jesus said to them, "Very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." This is God's word.
Thanks be to God. So, just a second. So, if you're joining us for the first time, my name is Nash Warugoro, and I have the privilege of leading this community of faith. And we are in the midst of an ongoing conversation about being anchored in the I am. Anchored in the I am. This idea that, as sort of Anne has alluded to, just by virtue of the season that we are going through, there is so much that is being shaken all around us, and it's just so easy to feel like we are hanging in somewhere in the air. But then we are contending for this idea that Jesus actually offers himself up for such times as this to be our anchor. And so we have had great conversations with Agi talking to us about Jesus as the bread of life, and Mr. Mondi last week talking about being the good shepherd. And literally, I am here partially because I'm insecure. I'm like between the worship that we have had and the prayer devotion movement that we get, I feel like we could just close church and go home, And then we added Miss Agnes Olo, and then we added Mr. Omondi, and soon you hear from Dr. Naitore, and I was starting to feel a bit irrelevant, I am being edged out of this church. It's supposed to literally be something that I claim, talking about Jesus being the gate and the shepherd. So luckily for me, yesterday I was reminded that I'm actually not supposed to be the shepherd, the shepherd of this church is Jesus himself. So if you see me popping in to speak, it's just because I'm reclaiming my ego is acting up. So that's what this gathering and this movement is really about. As we talk about this idea of Jesus as the way. That I am the way, but it's almost expanding it a little bit from a part of what Mudhoni has read to us, which is this John 10, verse 7 to 10, which will be really at the center of our message today. That Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who come before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it in abundance." And eventually we're going to land there, but to get the context for this particular moment, we have almost to retrack our steps a little bit back to John chapter 9. And in John chapter 9, we discover that we find Jesus, first we get to know that this is happening on a Sabbath. So it's like on a Sabbath, there's this day of rest, and Jesus and his disciples are sort of wandering around the streets, and they come across a blind man, and they have a conversation about it. And then Jesus ends up healing this man, specifically by spitting on the ground and making some mud and attaching it to his eyes, and then sending him to cleanse himself at some nearby river, as it were. Like literally, that's how John 10 starts. This should have been the most easy miracle to happen, Nothing is big, but it turns out this turns to be a dramatic thing. Like very soon, this man goes and he cleans his eyes, and now he can see. And so you can imagine his joy. He is excited that his eyes are finally able to say, he can see all the colors and all the people and all that going on. And so this man seems like he shows up at his local. Whatever the local is. I mean, from the river, he sees, maybe goes home, changes clothes, and then he tokeas in his local. And he's sort of strutting around, And people start noticing him. Like, isn't this the guy who was blind? And soon enough, it's a whole conversation about, is he the same? Is he not the same? And so he has to jitate and say, actually, I'm the guy. I'm like the guy who was blind, and you guys were throwing and tossing coins on me. I'm like now the guy, and I can see. And of course, this is the bigger question but how is it that you can see? And so he says, this man Jesus, he applied this mud on me and sent me to the river and cleaned, and then, this is me and I can see. And this, again, should lead to jubilation. Man, our guy can finally see. Like he can finally see who Joroge is, this person he has always known by voice, and who is this who has been giving him pennies, Finally, it's like, it's you, dude, and you are so wealthy. Why were you just dropping coins on my bowl, as it were, right? And like it should be like a moment of like celebration, But it gets more confusing because apparently these people within this local place can't seem to agree. And so they drag the man to the Pharisees. They seem to agree to this movement. All of a sudden, this man who showed up to his local with a big story to celebrate becomes sort of like a pawn. So now we have to carry him and take him to the Pharisees. And how do we explain this to the Pharisees in the first place? All right, here's this dude. Like, we know him. Like, guy hangs around our street. All these years, we've been giving him coins since he was a baby, whatever. He's a child of who and who, whatever. And then he just showed up today and said he can see. The bigger story is he says that this is Jesus' fella who applied mud on him, and he says that this worked on him. And the Pharisees should have been like, oh my God, welcome to the fold. We are so glad you can see. Tell us more about this story. It doesn't go like that. As a matter of fact, they start questioning him. Like, tell us again. Like, how is it that you came to see? It becomes a whole discussion. And before you know it, again, the people forget their man, and now they are arguing amongst themselves about this Jesus fella. Is he from God? Is he a man possessed by some devil? And the whole conversation turns, believe it or not, with the fact that it's on Sabbath, and this guy spit on the ground and made some mud and attached it to the eyes. You imagine they would focus on the yuckiness of the process. These guys are much more focused, as Bible scholars they go for, but that is work. So that is sin, which complicates things, because how is it that you are healing this guy from an act of sin? And then there's a whole big debate going on, and before you know it, they're like, we don't trust this guy. Someone sent for his parents. And so you can imagine the parents are brought along. Maybe they didn't even know that this had happened. And sure enough, they come and they see, sure enough, it's our Kamau. And it's true, he can see. They should, the first thing would be, praise Jesus, right? Apparently, no. In this context, you don't celebrate just randomly. In this moment, you pay attention to the questions that are being asked. And so they ask, is this your son? And say, oh, yeah, of course he's our son. Dude was born blind. But it's not something also you say with pride. It's something you say with a bit of shame, because in this particular culture, as you would lead from as John 9 starts, it's assumed that someone must have sinned. So because this idea of who has sinned is a complex one. We are not sure if it's Kamau in this case who is a sinner, which is why he had to be inflicted with blindness, or whether it is us, the parents, who had done something behind the scenes, and therefore our son was punished on our behalf. So they are not saying this he's you say it with a bit of shame because it implicates you in a sense. So they say this, but more importantly, these guys should be walking up and warming up to Kamau, because if Kamau can now see, it at least vindicates them as a collective family to say that actually no one is no longer in sin. Like whatever sin we were being punished for, whether it's Kamau, whether it's us, the parents, it's been lifted. So it should be a moment of celebration, but it's not for these parents. As a matter of fact, it turns out to be the greatest parents throwing under the bus kind of scenario we ever find. These guys is at least we know, and we know the guy was blind, but as to how he came to see, dude, we were just doing our things, resting at home. If you didn't call us, we wouldn't have known this. But in their answer, they give us a hint of what's going on here. Because in their answer, they say that they threw the son under the bus. They say that they threw the son under the bus really because they were afraid of the Jews. For the Jews had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of synagogue. Therefore, the parents said he is of age. And you see what the parents are doing. Not only do you have to deal with this thing of sin or whatever not, but you also show up into this place with the right, with the right posture, the right attitude, like things hang in the balance here. If you respond this dramatically and in the wrong way, definitely you get kicked out of the synagogues. Again, who is doing the kicking out of the synagogues? It's the Pharisees. But why is this being kicked out of the synagogue such a big deal? Because for this son who has been blind in this culture, because he was in sin, or maybe his parents sin, and we are not sure who did it, he was cast out. He could never come into the synagogue to worship. So for you to be excommunicated from this place, it's a big deal. You're sort of being orchestrated. You're being said that you no longer belong. And of course, you can imagine how this story spreads in the village. That, Kamau's parents have been kicked out of synagogue. And before you know it, is it just Kamau's parents, or is it the entire of Kamau's family? So it's a big deal, this moment. And so these guys say, ask the guy, he is of age. And so they turn to this guy. And you can see this time now, these Pharisees and these Jews, they are very nuanced in the particularity of the answer they are looking for, right? The second time they call to the man who had been blind, and they say to him, give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner. Just agree with us. Who goes around spitting on the ground, working his hands on the Sabbath to heal people? The guy is a sinner. But not the blind man. He doesn't agree. He doesn't acquiesce. And so they keep going toe to toe. This blind man sort of exposing the underbellies of these Pharisees and these Jews and all their obnoxious sort of gatekeeping, as it were. And how this ends up eventually is with this guy being kicked out of the synagogue. So it is the parents are saved for now, and this guy is kicked out of the synagogue. Now, it's easy, of course, to move on past that story, but you be this guy for a moment. Like for all your life, since you're born blind, you have never belonged to this community. You've always been the guy who is on the margins, the guy who most likely is an embodiment of some sin that happened in the family. Either yourself or your parents, or maybe your family. Maybe it's a reminder that your family may be involved in some shady thing that they never sort of revealed. And so this is what you have lived through. You have lived through mocking and dissing and people being ashamed to be associated with you. And then this moment, and out of nowhere, you can see the very thing that was keeping you on the margins has been taken away. Of course, you are eager to re-enter society and to belong. This is more than seeing, which is a big deal. It's a fact that now you become a part of the society, right? You can be a participant. You can go to the synagogue. You can worship. This guy had never stepped foot in the synagogue. And this is supposed to be your moment of celebration, of being at the peak of it. This is it. You are supposed to be the guy writing a book to tell your story, then doing book tours in the neighborhood. But instead of this being how it ends up, simply because of no fault of your own, because of some code rules, because some Pharisees, because of some Jews have allocated themselves the role of deciding who is in and who is out. and who qualifies to belong and who doesn't qualify to belong. They simply decide you still don't belong enough. This time around, not based on your sickness, this time around based on the fact that you happen to have been healed by some guy that we don't approve. I mean, if you're going to be healed, please pick a guy that we agree is the official healer. As the story doesn't get any obnoxious like that. So the guy is kicked out. And it's at this point in this story that we see Jesus sort of coming around. It's sort of through the grapevine or whatever. Jesus hears that this man has been driven out. And so he comes finding him. Notice this guy doesn't go looking for Jesus. Jesus hears that this man that he healed a bit earlier has been chased out. And so he comes now looking for him. And when he looks for him, he says, do you believe in the Son of Man? Like, this is another weird conversation that Jesus has with this guy. Shouldn't he start with, what kind of questions were you asking you in there? You know? Did they say when you can go back? You know, do you think this is something you can resolve? No, he takes a whole complete tact. Do you believe in the Son of Man? And this guy answers, and who is he, sir? Tell me so that I may believe in him. And Jesus said to him, you have seen him. The one speaking with you is he. He said, the Lord, the formerly blind person says, Lord, I believe. And they clinch a word, and he worshipped him. So notice what is going on here. Literally, this guy has been kicked from the center of what it looks like to live as part of this community. And instead of Jesus just coming and sort of trying to smoothen the road and smoothen the waves and create a way so that this guy can end up in the synagogue, Jesus almost comes and creates an entire new way of belonging. Like when Jesus comes in, he offers this guy a whole new re-understanding of what it looks like to even worship God. Because I mean, this guy doesn't even have now to go to the synagogue and worship. Like he worships Jesus right there on the streets, wherever they were having these conversations, which should ideally have created more problems for him. But he doesn't seem to care because at the end of it, his belonging has been cultivated in a whole different space. And I tell you all this background sort of help you come with me to where we are going to be heading into, because Jesus, in very real sense, before he tells us about these metaphors that have to do with shepherd and the gates and who is in and who is out and how one becomes a good shepherd or not, Jesus lives into these metaphors before he even teaches them. He becomes a good shepherd to the man. He is the one who goes out to seek out this guy who has been kicked out by the systems and the powers that be. He becomes a doorway through which this man enters into a place of worship. I mean, you notice that, like literally at their place of worship, this local synagogue, they are gatekeepers. There are these Pharisees and these Jews who are checking out who is in and who belongs and who deserves to belong. But for Jesus, he comes and simply says, I am the one now determining your belonging and your lack thereof. And I say, you belong. So it becomes a doorway through which the man enters into a place of worship, because it's what this synagogue was. I mean, he becomes a good shepherd who literally lays down his life, puts himself at risk for this man to have belonging. Because you can imagine, these guys are already baying for Jesus' blood, as it were. They are already, They are already discussing ways of how to exclude him. Right? We don't even want to associate with anyone he has healed. So imagine then Jesus coming to that exact place outside where this guy has been kicked out and say, I'm like the Lord. I'm like the Son of Man. You can worship me here and now. I'm like, this is Jesus like almost daring these guys and saying, Mtadu, which has a price to it. This idea of I'm putting down my life so that you can have belonging, so that you can worship. So then when we come to these metaphors, they're not just words that Jesus is using. They are literally words that he tries his best to say these words embody what I'm about. And it's almost, I'm also telling you the story in chapter 9, so that you see how Jesus is sort of also contrasting himself with the Pharisees. And so then, after this guy is caught up in worshiping Jesus, as it were, Jesus seems to move his attention away from the man and almost says this to like the Pharisees who were around. I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind. And some of the Pharisees who were with him had this and said, surely we are not blind, are we? And Jesus says to them, if you were blind, you would not have sinned. But now that you say we see, your sin remains. And it doesn't matter who you are. You read that and you're like, why are you going on, Jesus? Which is what teases Jesus to go into the metaphors of the shepherds, almost trying to explain what is this whole thing that you're talking about. Which brings us now to John chapter 10. Are we together that far? Right? Hey, my ego is at stake here, you know? And like the goal is to beat Mr. Omondi. So very truly I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in another way, is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all of his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. Again, they will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him. They will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. And I mean, of course, like this sounds like dramatic and exotic, as Mr. Omondi was explaining to us, because we are so far removed from this sheep-keeping people. So basically, in a sense, here Jesus is like literally, he reaches out to one of the two local ways that these people who kept sheep would take care of their sheep, especially at night. And one of the ways is like sort of a community pen. And what we mean by a community pen is like maybe in the evening we all take our sheep, our different flocks, you know, the Mwangi's flock, Jogona's flock, Omondi's flock, all those flocks, they come and congregate at this place for drinking water. So they are at this watering point, right? But then it's at dusk and it's at night. And so instead of every person sort of tracking their flock and going and creating a place where they can sleep and spend the night just around the place, what they would do is they created this whole sheep pen. And so then the Jogonas will bring their flock in there, the Mwangis in there, the Omondis in there, the Atianos in there. Everybody brings their sheep into their sheep flock into this one huge community pen. And so once you bring all your sheep into this community pen, then the shepherds would hire a gatekeeper, right? Because now it's a number of us, I guess all of us contribute and decide who can we pay to watch over our sheep overnight, as it were. And then the guy, of course, does a good job and watches over all these random sheep through the night. And then the following day, you have to come and get your sheep and go and take them to pasture, as it were. And so this moment is what Jesus is referencing to, that you have this flock that has been put into all these different places. We are all multiple flocks put together, as it were. And in the morning, Jesus says, he is a good shepherd. Like he is the one who then comes through the gate. Because the gatekeeper knows him. He was there when they hired him. So the gatekeeper will know this is one of the guys whose flock is here. So he would come in and then he will call his sheep. And the sheep will congregate around him. And then he would then go in front of them and then lead them out to pasture. Now that story sounds like cool on all sorts of ways, but apparently it's still practiced in this sort of day and age. And Mr. Omondi gave us wonderful sheep stories last week. So this one just adds to those stories that we had last week. One of the stories is, I think, in the 90s or thereabout, a story is recorded that still have these Israel-Palestine fights around the border, And in one of these communities, I think the Palestinian authorities confiscated the sheep of this entire village because they weren't paying taxes. So they gathered all the sheep of these people, put them in one sort of, one place, as it were, as a way of punishment until this particular community could pay the taxes and then they could be released their God. And then their sheep, as it were. But then this woman shows up to these guys, to these military guys. And he begs them and says, oh my God, like I am a widow. These are the only sort of sustainers that I have. Can I please have my sheep? And this guy, in sort of a cocky way, looks at this woman and says, oh, wow, I would love to help you, mate, but do you not see there are like 500 sheep in here? How can I get your sheep? You know? It's like woman is like rather persistent, like the widow. And so this guy makes a deal with her. You know what? If you can go in there and pick your sheep, don't worry, I'll let you go with them. This guy thinks like, of course, like this is impossible. And the woman says, I thought you would never ask. So she goes, gets her son. And literally her son comes with this little trumpet thing. This is like in the 80s, it's like 2,000 years ago. No, it's like happened like that, recent as it were. Of course, 80s is like ages ago for some of you. Like, so what difference does it make 2080s, you know? Be that as it may, you know, for those of anyway, so brings the son, and the son literally plays this tune on the flute. And literally, out of like these like 500 sheep, certain sheep start pricking their ears. And before you know it, all these sheep literally start tricking towards the boy's voice. The boy's sort of trampoline voice or whatever the flute voice was. And literally by the end of within no short time, all the sheep from within the 500, her sheep, maybe say like there were 60, they all come to this boy. And you can imagine what happens. The lady goes by the gate and says, cheers, man. It's been little. You know? So I mean, it's like when Jesus says that he comes into the sheep, into the gate, and the gatekeeper opens for him, and the sheep hears his voice. Literally, that's what he's playing at. Like these guys would know this story without even thinking hard about it. Right? So they will call them, and they will come to him. He calls the sheep by name, and he leads them out. And then it says that when he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them. And the sheep follow him because they know his voice. So even in the leading, he is using his voice, which we could do so much more. But I want to pay attention to this one. They will not follow a stranger. They will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. And that's like another strange thing, because you think if you could just mimic that sort of flute voice, then whatever, the sheep would just come. And another story still is told, like sort of military and sheep, they seem to like each other. So again, in this still community, this military guys, they show up and they steal these sheep to go and of course, you know, enjoy it themselves. So they sneak into the sheep pen of someone and they carry out all his sheep. Now the shepherd was happily sleeping during this whole ordeal. So he wakes up in a panic. And he finds the sheep gone. Like all the sheep are gone. And he's stuck and he figures out, oh my God, what can I do? And do you think that the guy does? He actually finds a high ground place. And he starts talking to his sheep. He starts bleating some song or whatever it is that he does. And literally, these sheep, all the way several ridges from where the army has already pushed them, they start hearing this voice and they pause. And before you know it, all the sheep literally turn around from the military guys. And they go up the hills and the valleys, whatever, going towards the voice of the guy. Almost illustrating this idea that no stranger gets to have access to the sheep for as long as the sheep can hear the owner's voice. So if you take all this thing, and you could do so much more, theologians have done this more than we have time to do, you know. If you were to bring all this together, what Jesus is simply saying is that him and the sheep, the relationship between shepherds and the sheep is such an intimate relationship. Okay, maybe it helps to hear what Barbara Brown-Taylor says. This is Barbara Brown-Taylor talking about his friend who actually is a shepherd. Says that sheep tend to grow fond of their shepherds. Her friend went on to say, it never ceases to amaze him, this shepherd, growing up, that he would walk right through a sleeping flock without disturbing a single one of them, where a stranger could not step foot in the fold without causing pandemonium. Sheep seem to consider their shepherds part of the family, and the relationship that grows up between the two is quite exclusive. They develop a language of their own that outsiders are not privy to. A good shepherd learns to distinguish a bleat of pain from one of pressure, while the sheep learn that a clack of the tongue means food and a two-note song means that it's time to go home. Right? You hear what this guy captures so well in this moment. He captures this idea of the intense intimacy between the shepherd and the sheep. So in this sense, what Jesus, we could just bring it down to, Jesus is talking of his relationship to his sheep as an intimate. It includes this idea of knowing and being known. It includes this idea of cultivating a unique language in the flock. It includes this idea of loving tenderness. It includes this idea of care and compassion. This is how Jesus paints himself as a shepherd. Now, you might want to go back to the Pharisees and ask yourself, and how do they present themselves as shepherds? They are not intimate, they are distant. They don't see the human beings in front of them. They seem to be more than happy to sacrifice the human beings for the sake of whatever right relationship looks like for them. But Jesus says, Jesus is using this idea to almost paint this sense of, I am, and my relationship is personal, it's intimate. I know my sheep and the sheep know my voice. And not only one direction, it's this duality going on. We cultivate a unique language between me and my sheep. And at this point, of course, you can imagine, these guys listening to all this and the understanding of intimacy, they just go like, oh God, that's not on us. So we come to this line that Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. Not a surprise. So Jesus presses even harder. He pushes further to where we come to. So again, Jesus said to them, this is like the fifth time you're hearing this, very truly, I tell you, I'm the gate for the sheep. Oh, come before me are thieves and baddies, but the sheep do not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Which brings us to this idea of I am the gate. Now, I don't know about your conversational relationships around gates. I do not have great stories revolving gates. It's like exclusion. I am not the kind of a guy whose doors of wherever have been open often. I know some of you just walk and the doors are open for you. That hasn't happened yet, So where we live, it's like in this village, for those of you who have been there. And we live in a proper, Nairobi sort of place, And what I mean by that is like we have a strong perimeter fence all around the property. And it seems that wasn't enough. We have added all these barbed meshes around it to make it impossible for any wannabe thug to come and steal from us. So not only do we have like this big, humongous gate, like clicks to high heavens when you open it. Like it just lets you know, I am the gate, you are not, But then recently, as it turned out, all of us, like Mudhoni, the kids and myself were out, for different reasons. Then in the evening, Kikuyu had traffic from here to high heavens, and then there was no steamer. So I guess that contributes to the traffic because steamer and Kenyans, things just work haywire, So it was this crazy traffic. Then it was dark. And then our good friend Clara was coming to visit us and to regale us with amazing stories from her recent travels. So we were like excited. And so Mudhoni hears Clara is coming and she leaves me where I was and says, okay, you be coming later. Let me go hang out with Clara and put the children to bed. Then Clara gets home to our gate first, that big ugly gate there first. And it's dark, right? So you can't ring the bell. The bell won't work. So she calls like, yeah, so is there someone? We say like our house help is home. Just honk or something and she'll open. Clara does her best. She honks and her honk works and it's very loud. Nothing happened. And she's doing this honking, and now it's getting confusing. Mudhoni finally shows up with the children. Mudhoni should ideally have the answer. Do you have an extra copy of keys? No, we left the house help at home, so should be fine. So Mudhoni joins in the honking, the shouting of the house help's name across the fence, Imagine, I don't know if they got there, but they should have tried to throw stones over, the whole thing. But nothing. At which point, I assume Mudhoni or one of them, they're both Mudhonis, one of them remembers, one of us has a husband. It's for seasons and moments like this that you have a husband. Call your guy. So Nash gets a call. It's like, say, hey, you guys. So we are at the gate. We assume the house help is inside, but it's not opening. You want to come and sort us out? To which I said, oh my God. And I picked my car keys and hurriedly left to go solve the problem, you know? And like as I'm driving, I'm just going like, what am I going to do, you know? So true to my form, I come and I start where everyone has started, right? Maybe I honk a bit. Maybe I shout over the gate because they clearly haven't done that, you know? And like eventually, I'm like, this is the last hope. Like if the husband doesn't solve this, what hope do we have, right? So I better husband up. So I husband up and I say, the only way is to jump over that thing. Now, of course, you can jump over the gate. It's like a big monstrous thing. But there's a fence, like put there specifically to prevent the kind of behavior that I want to engage in. You know what I mean? So like, you can just see me, this guy. And I'm like, they're partying it. And like, have you also met me? I'm like rather cautious guy, right? I'm like, and then like the next day was Sunday. I mean, in my defense, I don't want like telling people, oh no, we can't have to church tomorrow, because the husband was climbing over gates. And he is still hanging by the wire mesh that he, you know. So anyway, the bottom line is I'm still here. Church happened. And the long story is our house help was sleeping happily. She did not hear anything through all this time. And eventually it was a good night and steamer did come. Anyway, bottom line is I do not have great stories with gates. And I hope you do, you know. But as far as I'm concerned, when I hear of a gate, I just think of a barrier. The thing that stands in the way of accessing whatever is inside or even accessing whatever is outside. Right? So then when Jesus shows up and says that I am the gate, let's start by being very honest. That this verse has been used to harm a lot of us Jesus followers. It is one of those like clobber verses, the one that we pull out during family meetings and we hammer one another with it but Jesus is the only way, man. It's like the only way to the gate. How else do you think you're going to have this? And there's some truth in that, but it's the way we viewed this. Because in our mind, I think, because we crave so much for certainty, so now Jesus says he is a gate, we imagine a gate like that. I mean, better still imagine like a double-joined, one of those like, really, really thick military type gates. Like you cannot penetrate because Jesus is standing in the way. And the way is narrow, by the way. Right? Turns out that's not necessarily what will happen. But for us, we need to almost rethink this idea because we don't associate gates with freedom. And that's what Jesus is doing here, right? That's why it was important to paint the idea of Jesus referencing himself as an intimate, loving, tender. So you can't just simply say that's Jesus. But then when it comes to creating boundaries, he becomes a big block of black gate. As a matter of fact, in this context, it may very well be that Jesus is the gate that we just need. Because it turns out, Jesus in this context is reaching out for one more way that shepherds would take care of their sheep in this particular context. And that would happen, especially if you're out in the wilderness. So if you're out in the wilderness and you're not moving closer to where several of you can sort of co-share the sheeppen kind of a thing. You have these tiny sheepens out there just by yourself, just like can hold just your sheep, maybe 50 of them or whatever. And it's small enough, and it's not meant to keep like big enemies or whatever it is, just to watch over the night. But then once they kept the sheep inside, what the shepherd would do, literally they have history of this, the shepherd would literally lie across the gate. Like he would sleep and be the gate. So then when Jesus says, like, I am the gate, like these people would automatically have understood that he has switched matters. Now we are out in the wilderness and the sheep are a few. And this is not instead of multiple flock. Now this is a small flock of your own. And he is just letting the sheep inside the sheep pen and literally sleeps outside sleeps across the gate. I was fascinated by this idea. So when Jesus says, I am the gate, literally what he is saying is, I am the guy who, when we are out in the wilderness, not by the watering place, as Mr. Omondi told us, not by Psalm 23, moment. We are out in the wilderness, and there might be wild animals there. That's a legitimate thing. There might be baddies, there might be thieves, or whatever it is. The way I best know how to protect my sheep is to take them into this sheep pen and then lie at the doorway, protecting the sheep from whatever might come outside, but also protecting the sheep from hopefully wandering out. So for as long as I am lying at the door, the sheep are safe inside the place. So you listen to that and you think of all the ways that we use that verse, sort of like make Jesus an exclusive sort of God that is only ours. Jesus still makes this complex. He says, yes. Yes, it's very important that you also know that I am the exclusive doorway to the sheep. Now, this one, next one I'm about. It says like, whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. Now, I'm just to show you a short clip over here. And this short clip is just really that short. It's from a movie called San Andreas, which apparently is in reference to one of those long forts that we have where tectonic plates shift or whatever. That place most prone to have an earthquake, as it were. And so this movie is a whole earthquake. If you're like not scared of like ugly noises and breaking glasses and all those things, hey, be my guest. But this is in 2015. So here's a snapshot of that movie. Musiokis, we need the sound, sort of. We won't have sound. Oh my God. Okay, first I apologize for that little curse word there. Literally, we edited the clip and then I still attached the wrong one. Sorry about that. But the point I'm playing there, it's rather dramatic. I know, even Mudhoni agreed, right? I'm like overselling this idea. But here's what I want you to hear. Like when Jesus says that whoever comes by me, whoever enters by me will be saved. Like, if we just to pause there. whoever enters by me will be saved. The truth of the matter is you and I, we are a people. We are more like sheep who are in a field of endless seduction. We are always being seduced. If you just go through this doorway, this will be the one that brings you life. This will be the one that saves you. And whether we understand saving in this context, like literally eternal damnation, or saving literally for this sheep as just surviving the night, here's a big bottom line. Is that there are all these doors that each one of us gets to choose. Every single one of us. Especially if you live in Nairobi. I'm like, they're like, okay, in Kikuyu, they're like endless doors that are being dangled in front of you. If you only got this job, this will be your salvation. If you just got this relationship, this will be your salvation. If you just click this next clip, it will solve all your anxiety. If you just do this thing. So yes, there is a very real sense and very real danger of why Jesus says, I am, whoever comes by me, whoever enters by me will be saved. Because not all doors. You see how confident that lady was. Get out of my way, because every lift is ideally supposed to take us to some escape from this nightmare earthquake. But it turns out, in a context like the one we are in, the places of anxiety and stress, and the world that is upside down, not all doors lead to life. Now, what may look like a very alluring door may actually hasten your demise. And of course, you hear that in church, like, of course, it's not an earthquake, right? Maybe that is even what makes it even worse, because the doors we enter, they are so nicely curated that by the time you wake up and realize that you have lost your entire plot, it's been decades. But also, even if it's not decades, how about one day of your life lost? Isn't that worth something? Isn't that enough worth seeking to pursue the right door, the kind of door that leads to true salvation? So let's start here as we bring this to home. We started with Jesus, who is like this intimate, personal, close, as compassionate as they can get. We went all the way, now we come back here. Which doors are presenting to you as more compassionate, more intimate, more loving than Christ can be? Which doors? You know them. You know them. But are they leading to true salvation? But then Jesus doesn't stop there. Like, just this one thing. It says, whoever who enters by me will be saved. That's the exclusive part. Then this saving has this other dramatic sense to it, that they will come in and go out and find pasture. Remember why the sheep ended up in this sheep pen in the first place. They ended up here looking for rest. This is not a place, it's not a practice of zero grazing. No. Literally, you are in a sheep pen because you need to rest for the night, to rejuvenate, to renew, to refresh yourself, so then you can wake up and go pursue pasture in the wilderness. So here's what I want to say. Maybe Jesus simply says, I am the doorway to your rest. And you're welcome to try all sorts of doorways that the world is offering. But Christ still offers himself as the doorway to rest. The doorway to rest. Maybe anxiety, worry won't give you more rest. Maybe even taking a break isn't what you need. Maybe what you need the most is the kind of shepherd that allows and leads you into a place of rest and safety. Someone who directs you home is what you are hoping for. But you're not stuck at home. And Mr. Omondi said this so well in his different variation of sheep. Jesus is not just so intent in keeping us inside the sheep pen, as it were. No. He understands that sheep pen is a place to rest. As a matter of fact, where pasture is out in the wilderness. And I think that we as Jesus followers sometimes hear these words almost as saying that we just need to enter into that place of rest and then stay there for the rest of our lives because we'll be safe. And God keeps calling us, daring us to adventures. None of us gets to get to the next level without the necessary risk that the wilderness portends. You still have to put yourself out there. You still have to leave. Hopefully, Jesus is assuming that you are leaving from this place from a place of rest. And then you're showing up into the world, and you're still showing up in this economy. You're still showing up in your toxic workplace. You're still showing up to your family. You're still showing up to your children. You're still doing the hard work of paying school fees. Like, that is a wilderness. But it's easy to also hear that Jesus is this doorway and feel like Jesus is just one thing. And above all, Jesus still remains the I am the great I am, the Emmanuel who is God with us. So maybe Jesus doesn't worry so much about our going and coming, because wherever we go, he will be with us. So maybe we come and we still feel like we leave God behind, but God never is left behind. Whoever enters by me will be saved. At one, we have come there. And then this idea that almost Jesus risks, that even in our, as we leave, as we come and go from this sheep pen and we go and find pasture, that in finding pasture, as Mr. Omondi talked about last week, we also tend to wander. We tend to get lost. And in those moments, it's easy to feel like, oh, I have left Jesus the gate, Jesus the doorway. And I need to almost like run back to the pen. And just like say, like, that's not the kind of shepherd that I am. One of my favorite writers, Sarah Bessie, says is through scriptures and the long stories of the church, we see over and over that God encounters their people, his people in the wilderness. In fact, God often calls us out into the wilderness. The wilderness is always a misstep. Getting lost isn't always a misstep. Sometimes it's right on the map and you're here on purpose. That the gate to the wilderness can very well be the gate to intimacy with God, to transformation, to encounter with the wideness of God's mercy. And God's abundant life isn't only for the safe pastures, it's also for us by the cliffs and ends of our lives. So here's where I want to learn this from this long-winded journey that I've taken you. Jesus still remains the gate. I am the gate. Whoever comes through me will be saved. Is anyone here in need of salvation? I know we make that the eternal, and that's absolutely important. Don't hear me wrong. You need the eternal salvation. But is someone here in need of salvation because their business is tanking? Because they had a terrible client meeting this past week? Because they can feel themselves drowning in depression, in the hopelessness of the situation? Is there anyone here in need of salvation? Jesus says, if only you would come through me, you will find rest. If only you come through me, you will find rest. Is there anyone here who feels like they have left the covering, the protection, the rest that comes with the past? Is there someone here who just feels like they're alone in the wilderness? And to you, Jesus will still say, maybe I'm the one who has allowed you to be in that wilderness. And maybe more than you running back in, maybe you need to find me next to you right in your wilderness. More importantly, are you trapped in some door that promised life, and now all you have going for you is death? In one area of your life, in some other area, is there some place that you found yourself leaning in? And let's be honest, we, the church people, like I was telling the other day, we here, maybe this shouldn't be said out loud, but we here are the ones powering the whole pornography industry. It's not the people in the world. We in here are the people caught up in betting industries. We in here are the ones still caught up in very, very harmful, toxic relationships that stopped being life-giving years and years ago. Maybe it's to you the Lord is saying, I am the gate. And this is a different gate. So I invite the worship team back up. And as I invite them back up, I invite you to the one person who still offers himself as a good shepherd. The one who still offers himself as the rightful person who comes through the doorway. And the sheep hear his voice. And he's intimate and he's there. He is still the one who offers himself as a gate. So, With those many invitations, welcome to the Lord's table. Each one of us, either at the back or at the front, is welcome to this Lord's table. Because Jesus is here in very particular and personal ways, still saying, I am your gate. I can give you rest. And I can lead you into the pastures in the wilderness. I am the gate. I can find you in your lostness, in your wandering. I am the gate. So just come and get the elements either at the front or at the back, and at the end of this, our gathering together, we will share in the Lord's communion together.